I've been doing some thinking, some reflecting, and I've realized recently the only time that I've been correct in my theories about Boruto is when those theories have been about people who are exclusive to Boruto. See, because I love thinking about theories and stretching my brain in ways that could complete the Boruto story in ways that it may not be completed. I love ideating that maybe Kashin, Koji, and Boruto are in one of Orochimaru's caves because Sasuke went to Orochimaru, the one person who he knew wouldn't be upset about Naruto's death, and said, hey, I need you to teach this disciple for me, please. And Orochimaru, who may or may not be affected by omnipotence, says, yeah, okay, I'll take Boruto. I'm already kind of a roguish ninja anyways. And that's why Kashin, Koji, and Boruto are in one of Orochimaru's caves. However, as I look back at my dozen or so most recent theories, I've realized every single time I've centered a theory around a character who started their story in Naruto and not Boruto, I have been wrong. And that's interesting because it has less to do with how I theorize and more to do with who I'm theorizing about. See, because in recent weeks, whenever I've theorized about characters like Kashin Koji or Himawari or Mitsuki, I've been correct. However, when I let my brain take me back to the good old days of Naruto and remember how much I love those characters from Naruto, and therefore I make a theory on how to reintroduce those characters into Boruto, I'm always wrong. And this trend line points to a rather important tonal shift that I believe we need to talk about. See, because I don't think it's a surprise to any of you when I say I try and formulate my theories with as much reason and in-universe logic as possible. I don't theorize because I want some things to happen. I theorize because I think some things should happen. I mean, okay, there's a little bit of want in there, but the want is always backed up by a solid foundation of logic. But I've realized something recently, and by recently, I mean today, and that thing is that logic isn't necessarily being applied to Boruto, at least when it comes to Naruto characters. See, the thing that I've realized is that Naruto and Boruto characters are being treated differently in the Boruto timeline. While Boruto characters apply to in-universe rules and logic, in order to make sure that the Naruto characters don't absorb too much of the shine of the Boruto timeline, logic is slowly but surely being stripped from Naruto characters. And thus, Naruto characters are slowly but surely becoming less and less themselves to cement the idea that they don't monopolize screen time from the characters that need developing. And this doesn't only apply to the motivations and actions of Naruto characters, but also the motivations and actions that could bring those Naruto characters back into the fold of this story. And for the life of me, I can't figure out if that's a bad thing. So whether it's characters like Might Guy, Orochimaru, Sakura, or Kakashi, all of them have sound and logical reasons to re-enter the story. And yet, at every single turn, they haven't. And while that may be for the greater good of the story and the development of some of the younger characters in the Boruto universe, I can't help but feel like we're ignoring the logic of the universe to accomplish that goal. And thus today, I want to talk about some Naruto characters in the Boruto universe who have every excuse to not only be doubtful of omnipotence, but also play large and present roles in the Boruto timeline, and yet aren't, and probably won't, because today we're talking Naruto is done. But before we get to finishing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous and want to hear me talk about anime and manga that aren't Naruto and Boruto, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where I talk all anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into all that, today we got to talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Grunes. Grunes wants to make hitting your nutritional goals easier. How many of you out there are taking multiple supplements a day? Or how many of you feel like you should be taking multiple supplements a day? Well, fortunately, because of Grunes' comprehensive and convenient formula, which is neither a multivitamin, a greens gummy, or a probiotic, but instead all three of those things wrapped into one fantastic package, is not only going to give you all the nutrition you would get from taking those multiple supplements, but also give it to you at a fraction of the price. On top of that, They taste great. See, honestly, every single day I look forward to my packet of Groons because they taste about as good as any gummy bear on the market. But they also help me with my gut health, my energy, and my cognition. In fact, if I don't take my daily Groons before I film a video, I feel like I'm filming in slow motion. And I absolutely adore that it's 8 gummies per pack. 1, it feels like a snack, and 2, I feel like we preserve the flavor this way. On top of that, Groons are vegan, nut-free, dairy-free, and gluten-free. And they provide 20 plus vitamins per pack, while your standard multivitamin only offers 7 to 9. And they're able to achieve that because over 60 whole food ingredients go into every pack of Groons. And they achieve this level of flavor with only 3 grams of added sugar. And they also offer a sugar-free option, all with no artificial colors or flavors. And if you're going on a road trip for a couple of days, or you're gonna be out of town and away from your Groons pack, well, fortunately, they're easy to travel with. On top of that, they're HSA and FSA eligible for reimbursement. So what are you waiting for? Get up to 45% off your Groons today using the link in my description. It's time nutrition started tasting good. So if you've followed this page for any amount of time, you've probably heard me fantasize about different ways that Kakashi, Orochimaru, Sakura, and so many other characters from Naruto could re-enter the fold of Boruto. And by and large, the way that I believe I've gone about explaining their re-emergence into the story has been logical. One of my favorite theories that we touched on a couple of times is that Kakashi is going to be reintroduced into the story, preferably in a teaching role. And for the life of me, I still really can't see how this theory isn't gonna pan out. See, because yes, while like everybody else on Earth, Kakashi was most likely affected by omnipotence, even if he was affected by omnipotence, he told Sasuke straight up that if Sasuke ever went rogue again, he'd be the person to hunt him down. And considering the fact that Naruto is presumed dead in the minds of everybody who's been affected by omnipotence, and considering the fact that Sakura is just for some reason maintaining her day job as the head of the hospital, even though her husband absconded with the person who probably killed their best friend in Naruto, that really leaves the only person who would willingly chase after Sasuke as Kakashi. Sarada's not doing it, Sakura's not doing it, and Naruto's presumably dead. And thus if Kakashi should be anywhere, as he very clearly doesn't appear to be in Konoha, because if he was, I'd like to assume that he would have been around for Boruto's interrogation. I mean, the elders were there, and the elders are just a part of the Konoha Council, of which all previous Hokage sit on. And if we're inviting Amado to these interrogations, even though he's a questionable figure who walked into Konoha 3 years ago and threatened Shikadai's life, then why are we not inviting the previous Hokage? Listen, I understand maybe not inviting Tsunade, maybe she's off gambling somewhere, but where is Kakashi? And the only real answer I have to that question is that he's looking for Sasuke. But if Kakashi is out there looking for Sasuke, it would make sense that in some way or another that he'd finally be able to track down Sasuke, realize that Sasuke's in a tree, and maybe end up with Boruto and Kashin Koji. I mean, Kakashi is one of the greatest sensor type and tracking ninjas in the entirety of the Naruto universe. He'd be able to track down Sasuke, especially if he was in a tree. But even if you want to take it out of the equation that Kakashi would be able to track down Sasuke and Boruto, there's a big problem for one of the main characters in the story, and Kakashi is the only person who'd be able to fix it. See, while Sarada has been proven to be strong enough to be able to hit one fatal blow against Hidari, she hasn't really had access to what one would deem as a good teacher for the entirety of the time skip. And while Kakashi obviously no longer has his Sharingan, he has the most Sharingan experience out of everybody who's not dead or in a tree. And thus if you reasonably wanted to make Sarada stronger without just going, she's stronger now, which I fear may be the direction we're currently heading with Sarada, the only person who would be able to accomplish that with her would be Kakashi. But that doesn't appear to be the direction that we're heading. See, I figure with Boruto coming into Konoha and protecting Sarada's unconscious body, that he would take Himawari and Sarada and retreat to Orochimaru's caves, at which point the three of them would begin to train together, creating the foundation of Team Boruto. But instead, Boruto was taken hostage, interviewed, interrogated for one chapter, and is now split back to Kashin Koji. And thus Sarada has essentially fallen into the exact same situation that she was in chapter 1 of Two Blue Vortex, a woman on an island in Konoha with no way to get stronger. And thus this is really the first scenario in Boruto where I feel like logic is failing as it pertains to the motivations of Naruto-based characters in order to make sure that Naruto-based characters don't soak up the spotlight, why would I say Starlight? See, because, well, here's the thing. Well, Kashin Koji is a good sensei and draws obvious parallel lines to Jiraiya. The only place where Kashin Koji truly thrives as a sensei figure is the fact that he has the Tenpats and the ability to see all possible futures. And therefore, Kashin Koji is able to teach Boruto all of the moves that he would have learned in the future, which is really cool. But Boruto is not the only main character of this story. If Sakura is supposed to fill more of a role than her mother, and my god, I hope that she is, then she's gonna need her own Kashin Koji, and it won't be Kashin Koji. A lot of the strives that Sakura made in part 1 of Boruto tied into the training that she was doing with either Sakura or Sasuke. And as she doesn't appear to be doing much in the way of training with Sakura, and Sasuke's decorating the nearest fern tree, really the only person that I could feasibly see filling that role in any true capacity would be Kakashi. I mean, what's she gonna learn from Konohamaru? But we're ignoring that, because reintroducing Kakashi means reintroducing another person who's got to take up screen time as they try to teach Sarada. And thus, if you're an author who's trying to focus on the development of characters from Boruto, both from a strength perspective and from a narrative perspective, unfortunately, the easiest way to go about that is to just say that Sarada got stronger, which we've already kind of started building towards. See, Sarada, while she did pull off a couple of impressive Chidoris in battles against inner Kara members like Boro, managed to pull out a Chidori that would have been fatal against the double Rinnegan Shinju, an upgrade in strength that genuinely none of us really saw coming because we didn't know what Sarada's been up to for the last 3 years and still don't, outside of kicking down Shikamaru's door and yelling about omnipotence. See, but Kakashi isn't the only character who's being somewhat purposely excluded from part 2 of Boruto, because the exact same logic, or lack thereof, could apply to Sakura. See, like we've already established, it is weird that Sakura's just at her day job right now, maintaining the hospital. While yes, obviously she is an incredibly vital piece in Konoha, and without her maintaining the hospital, people would die. But outside of Ino, Naruto may be Sakura's best friend on Earth. Tie that in the fact that Sakura and Hinata were also friends, and Sakura should have a grudge as big as anybody towards Boruto. However, it gets even worse when you consider the fact that Sasuke, her actual husband, absconded from Konoha, becoming a rogue ninja again to join the boy that may have killed some of her best friends. And thus, in response to this incredibly traumatic experience, Sakura really could have gone one of two ways. Now, the objectively more logical way that she could have gone is that once her husband became a rogue ninja for a second time and possibly executed Naruto, accomplishing a goal that he wasn't able to achieve a decade and a half ago, Sakura could buy into the mentality that the rest of Konoha is probably buying into, which is simply just that Sasuke has been taking advantage of Naruto's good nature for the entirety of their friendship. And therefore the reason that Sakura doesn't seem distraught or isn't trying to chase after Sasuke is because she's effectively given up on him. And this wouldn't be crazy. Sasuke did try to kill Naruto at the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, and one of the few people who knows that is Sakura. And well, yes, they're friends now. Sasuke has been gone for the entirety of Sarada's childhood. Sakura barely knows him. And one of the first and most important things that he does now that he's returned back to the village in any capacity is abscond with Boruto, who may have just killed Naruto and Hinata. However, that's not who Sakura is. Well, yes, Sakura did lose faith in Sasuke once or twice in his first stint as a rogue ninja. That was all powered by a couple of intimate conversations on a bench and being knocked out 3 or 4 times so Sasuke could actually run from the village. But nowadays, they're married. They have a daughter together. And therefore, you best believe Sakura's ability to ignore the atrocities of Sasuke is much higher now than it used to be. And therefore, if anything, Sakura should be highly doubtful that Sasuke is doing anything bad in being a rogue ninja hanging out with Boruto. I mean, when Sasuke was actively hanging out with Orochimaru, trying to kill Jinchuriki, trying to kill Team 7 with a Kirin, Sakura was still like, oh no, he's probably doing it for a good reason, I can change him. So if anybody should have faith that Sasuke isn't as rogue as everybody else says, it should be Sakura. Ties into the fact that Sakura lives in a house with one of the few people unaffected by omnipotence who's been using every bit of her vocal cords to scream all across the village that Boruto is not a bad guy, and therefore, by extension, neither is Sasuke. And Sakura should not only be one of the most outspoken people in Team Boruto, but also there's a fair amount of chance that she was never affected by omnipotence in the first place. It has been established multiple times that Sakura is immune to genjutsu. Even Otsutsu Otsutsuki level genjutsu, as the genjutsu that protected the portal to the moon in the last was created by the Otsutsuki. And therefore Sakura, even if she is affected by omnipotence, as one of the most intelligent people in the entirety of the Naruto universe, tied in with her borderline genjutsu immunity, should have very easily been able to break out of omnipotence given her circumstance. Because as we've seen time and time again, because if your doubts are ever proven to be correct about your memories being futzed with, you are able to break out of omnipotence, albeit briefly, as we've seen that Shikamaru is currently beginning to be re-affected by omnipotence, even though a couple of chapters ago he was having full-on conversations with Boruto about how omnipotence works. And thus, even if it was briefly, Sakura should have broken out of omnipotence at some point. And here's the thing though, you do eventually forget how omnipotence works even if you break out of it. However, we're not going to sit here and act like Sakura and Sarada wouldn't have conversations about it every single time Sakura started to go fuzzy. And thus, there really is no reason for Sakura to not be one of the focal characters in part 2 of Boruto. And yet, she is not. Instead, being placed on the sidelines as simply the leader of the hospital, the person who checks Inogen to make sure that the heals that Himawari did were good. And this again is a moment of ignoring the logic that would apply to a certain character in their specific circumstance. Also, we don't need to dedicate more screen time to them. But the list doesn't end there. Orochimaru falls into the exact same camp as both Kakashi and Sakura. See, Mitsuki in chapter 14 has effectively shown the ability to break out of omnipotence. See, because not only is Shikamaru aware that Mitsuki will probably break Boruto out of his handcuffs if he's brought to Boruto's interrogation, but he's so sure of that fact that as the acting Hokage, he hands a note to Mitsuki, who actively tried to kill Boruto only 4 or 5 chapters earlier, that has the code for Boruto's handcuffs so that Mitsuki can break him out of said handcuffs. And thus, whether it's Mitsuki being broken out of omnipotence or truly doubting that Kawaki is his son, Mitsuki has, in some capacity or another, reversed the effects of omnipotence. And if Mitsuki's able to do that, you'd like to assume that the person who's unlocked immortality and has dozens of Mitsukis waiting in test tubes in case Mitsuki dies one day, Orochimaru would be able to do the same. Because here's the thing, it's been established that intelligence is the biggest prerequisite for breaking out of omnipotence. It's why Amado and Shikamaru were able to do it. But if there's one person who trounces both of their intelligences, it's Orochimaru, and that point is not arguable. Without the assistance of any Otsutsuki or their technology, Orochimaru's been able to accomplish everything that Amado has accomplished scientifically. Clones, artificial sage mode, immortality, cyborgs, all of it. And while Amado is obviously an incredibly talented scientist and wildly intelligent, a vast, and I mean vast majority of his scientific advancements can tie back to the fact that he had access to Otsutsuki technology. So if Amado's able to use scientific reasoning to realize that his memories have been altered, I can guarantee you that Orochimaru's in a similar situation. That logic is only being applied to Amado instead of Orochimaru because Orochimaru is a Naruto character and Amado is a Boruto character. Even though reintroducing Orochimaru would introduce a myriad of interesting plot lines, and Orochimaru would also be able to act as a serviceable teacher for not only Sarada, but also Himawari. On top of this, since we are actively trying to draw as many parallel lines between Boruto and Sasuke as possible, Boruto being taught by Orochimaru, especially considering the fact that Boruto's key elements are wind and lightning release, the two things that Orochimaru is great at, would make a lot of sense plot-wise. But Boruto already has a sensei, and that sensei comes from Boruto. And thus, so far as I see it, Orochimaru won't be reintroduced into the story. But it doesn't even end there. See, it's been established in the last couple of chapters that Himawari has a healing ability like we've never seen. See, Himawari, simply by laying her hands on Inogen, was able to reconstruct the entirety of his stomach. She was able to straighten out and heal a compound fractured leg in a matter of seconds. She was able to heal the wounds of Sarada and Boruto that were inflicted by Ishiki with his tailed beast ball sniper shots. And this healing that Himawari does is apparently so complete that even Sakura says that there's basically nothing else left to be done. Now, the only other people that we've ever seen this level of healing from are Sakura, Hashirama, and Tsunade. However, the application of healing at this level is only something that they could do on themselves. See, Sakura has also healed a giant hole in her stomach. In Sakura Hiden, her light novel, she takes a tailed beast cloak tail directly through the stomach. But because she has 100 healings activated, she's able to sprint down this chakra tail and knock out the person who stabbed her. She's then able to heal this giant cannonball-sized hole in her stomach, much like how Himawari did for Inogen. Sakura has also shown feats like regenerating entire lost limbs and much more. And obviously, we've seen Tsunade and Hashirama do very similar things, as Tsunade, with the help of Lady Katsuyo, was able to bring her two bisected halves back together and survive. And thus, when it really comes down to it, the only entity that's ever shown the ability to heal others at the level that Himawari is currently healing people is probably Lady Katsuya, a sage animal from Shikatsu Forest who's possibly thousands of years old and whose entire ability revolves around healing. And still, we're not entirely sure if Lady Katsuya was only able to bring the two halves of Tsunade back together because it was Tsunade. See, because we know the medical ninjutsu that Tsunade and Sakura apply to others, the two forefront medical ninjutsu users on Earth, mind you, is limited in a capacity. Sasuke and Naruto still don't have their original arms. When Naruto dies during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, Sakura has to cut his side open and manually pump his heart. The feats that Tsunade and Sakura are able to accomplish on themselves, they cannot reflect on others, but Himawari can, which means that anybody who's possibly debilitated from an injury that occurred during the 4th Great Shinobi World War or earlier could effectively be healed by the healing ability of Himawari. See, because if Himawari has the ability to recreate the entirety of Inajin's stomach, and perfectly, I add, then she could, I don't know, give Might Guy a new foot? See, because here's the thing. The sidelining of Might Guy has never made all that much sense. See, because the last time that we saw somebody have healing abilities on par with what Himawari's currently walking around with was Naruto, when he saved Might Guy's life. And what we assume Naruto did when he saved Might Guy's life was presumably give him a new heart. And while we're not entirely sure of this, Naruto did place his Sun Seal hand on Might Guy's chest, and a Sun Seal appeared over his chest where his heart would be. Now, what Naruto could have done here is also just stopped Might Guy's chest from pumping all of the chakra it possibly could. Because the way that the 8th gate works is that all of the chakra in the body is redirected to the heart, and the heart pumps so fast that it liquidates the blood inside the body. So Naruto could have also just stopped Might Guy's heart from beating that fast, which would have stopped him from turning entirely to ash. But so far as the repercussions of 8 gates appear to be to Might Guy is simply that about half of his left foot disintegrated. And thus, for the last 2 decades, Might Guy has been in a cast and in a wheelchair, which really makes no sense when you consider who Might Guy is and what the injury he incurred was. See, first off, if you can give Naruto a new arm, you can give Might Guy a half-a-foot prosthetic. We've had half-foot prosthetics since the 1800s. It's not a complicated process. You put a shoe on that has half a foot in it, and that becomes the front half of your foot. And yet Might Guy hasn't been able to walk for 2 decades? The man who would run around the village 1,000 times just to get 1% stronger hasn't cracked the code in the last 20 years about how to return to the battlefield in any capacity whatsoever. Tie that into the fact that taijutsu has now become the most important kind of way to fight, and yeah, you'd probably want the forefront taijutsu user in Konoha's history, the guy who was able to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Madara using taijutsu and taijutsu alone, back in some capacity or another. And therefore, if Himawari is able to heal people in the same way that Hashirama, Tsunade, and Sakura are able to heal themselves, then she should, as a relatively simple feat, be able to fix Might Guy's leg. But this won't happen. In actuality, today's video was just supposed to be about me crafting a theory about how Himawari could bring Might Guy back into the fold and how that would make so much sense, but I've now realized that theorizing about the return of Naruto characters in Boruto isn't logical. I mean, it is logical if you use in-universe explanations and the fact that all of these moves would make sense and that they should objectively happen, but when you take writer bias into account here and what the author is trying to accomplish, regardless of how much in-universe sense it would make for Himawari to simply lay her hands on Might Guy's leg and get him out of his wheelchair after 20 years, you gotta realize bringing Might Guy back into the story would take time away from, I don't know, Metal Lee, who already doesn't have time in the story. And this is why, for the life of me, I can't decide as to whether or not this is a good or a bad thing. See, because, well, yes, absolutely, I want Kakashi and Sakura, Orochimaru, and Might Guy back in the fold, and there's logical explanations to bring each and every single one of them back. Would bringing them back serve as a detriment to the greater development of Boruto characters as a whole? And, like, yeah, kind of. See, if we're introducing characters like Kakashi and Sakura and Orochimaru and Might Guy back into the story, they are pretty immediately gonna dominate the top of the power sphere. Well, yes, obviously none of them would be able to topple Code or Jura or Boruto or maybe even Kawaki. If you were to introduce any of those characters back into the story right now, they're immediately stronger than every member of the new Konoha 7 that's not Kawaki or Boruto. I'd make a fair argument that actually all 4 of those characters might be able to hang with Kawaki. And we consider the fact that a large part of Boruto Boruto has actively been dedicated to either trying to nerf Naruto and Sasuke or just remove them from the story, all but temporarily, so that the story could progress without them, then introducing other Naruto original characters into the story would kind of divert from the plot we're already trying to build. And this point was absolutely solidified by chapter 14. See, Ino should have been present for Boruto's interrogation. She's the head of the interrogation corps, and Ibiki's entire complicated way for getting Boruto's information was slamming his head against the table. Ibiki, the guy who has torture-based ninjutsu. And yet if Ino was in that interrogation room, she would have been able to dive into Boruto's memories and immediately would have become Team Boruto, as she would have become privy to all the information inside of Boruto's head. The truth of the Shinju, the truth of Jura, the truth of Omnipotence, the truth of Kawaki, and Boruto would have been able to hide the information that he hid from Ibiki and Konohamaru because Ibiki was just trying to punch it out of him. And thus, as Ino became Team Boruto, she inherently would have needed more screen time. She would have been privy to the true information of the world, and therefore she would have somewhat of an obligation to tell Team 10, and that spirals into Ino being the messenger of the truth and being directly opposed to the likes of Kawaki, and Kawaki possibly putting a target on her back. And now we have a sub-Ino plotline. However, Ikemoto specifically set up a circumstance in which Boruto was taken into interrogation at the same time that Inogen was critically injured, so that Ino would have an excuse to not be the one doing the interrogating. And yes, that was absolutely done intentionally. And the intentionality of that perfectly displays what Ikemoto is trying to accomplish with Boruto. He wants Boruto characters to be the ones stirring the pot of the Naruto universe. He wants Boruto characters to be the ones motivating enough in their own true intentions to carry this story forward. And he's not doing that just because he wants to. See, the reason that Ikemoto would be going forward with this approach is twofold. One, because Boruto isn't supposed to be Naruto Part 2, and this is an IP that's 90% Ikemoto and 10% Kishimoto, and therefore he would obviously be more motivated to make his character shine as opposed to Kishimoto's, but also because Ikemoto was an assistant on Naruto, and he saw full on what introducing too many characters can do to a fan base. Well, see, one of the beauties of Naruto is the fact that it has a fantastically deep roster. However, come Shippuden, that fantastically deep roster is forgotten. Characters that were massively beloved, like Neji, Rock Lee, Kiba, Choji, Ino, and so many others were forgot, all because when it really boils down to it, it's hard to make 3 characters interesting equally, let alone 12. And thus Ikemoto not only decided in the beginning of Boruto to not go for a Konoha 12 and rather opt for a Konoha 7, but he's also very clearly opting to not muddy down the amount of time he has to establish these 7 as interesting characters by also reintroducing old characters from Naruto. And thus, while it might come at the ignoring of in-universe logic that applies to Naruto characters, all of the logic that's ignored as it's applied to Naruto characters is done so to build out the interest and intrigue in Boruto characters. Because, like we said, there is a in-universe and logical explanation for why Ino is not the person conducting the interrogation. Inogen has been injured. She, as a mother, would obviously be with Inogen. And thus, if we can find that same level of logic and writing ability to apply to characters like Orochimaru, Kakashi, and Sakura and explain why they are not in the story, then I can absolutely live with that. To take that, all pun intended here, one step further, if you want to say that Himawari's healing ability is only usable on fresh wounds and therefore injuries that happened years ago, like Might Guy's leg injury, can't be healed through Himawari's healing means, I can also live with that. Not only would that serve as a good way to balance out Himawari's healing ability, which appears to be one of the most broken abilities we've ever seen in Naruto, period, it would also give us a reason to not reintroduce Might Guy into the story. If you want to say that Kakashi is actually out there looking for Sasuke, but Sasuke's tree is trapped in some other dimension and therefore Kakashi can't find him, I can live with that. If you want to say that Sakura has been broken out of omnipotence multiple times, but Sarada realizes that every time that Sakura is broken out of omnipotence, that she just goes back into it eventually, and therefore Sarada has realized that fighting that battle isn't worth it, I can live with that. If you want to say that Orochimaru has broken themselves out of omnipotence, but doesn't care enough about the politics of the world to interfere, I can live with that. But not until I'm told these things can I be alright with the exclusion of these characters from the Boruto timeline. Because the logic of the universe and the logic of that character doesn't deem that they would be excluded from the Boruto timeline. And it's not up to me as the reader to assume that all of those characters are in the situations I just listed, and that's why they're not being included. I should be told that. And I believe at some point we will be, because Ikemoto has done a very good job at excluding Naruto characters from the story in a way that makes sense. Naruto being placed in the Daikoku-ten, Sasuke being placed in a divine design tree. Those were masterful ways to exclude them from the story so that Boruto, Kawaki, Code, Sarada, and Himawari could grow as characters. But the list of Naruto characters who need an excused absence note from a doctor to not be in Boruto does not end at Naruto and Sasuke. I don't need Choji back in this story. I don't need Tenten back in this story. I don't need Kiba back in this story. I don't even need Ino back in this story. But I would genuinely like an explanation for why Kakashi, Sakura, Orochimaru, and Might Guy are not in this story. And I feel as though that's not crazy. But if you guys think it's crazy or think that it's crazy that I believe that Ikemoto is actively sacrificing Naruto characters to promote Boruto characters, tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now I gotta go wash and moisturize my Robin tattoo because I got it colored in. You can barely tell because it's mostly flesh tone because it's Cien Fleur and it's all made out of her hands. It's also still very red and it hurts a lot. And it's getting tight and scabby, and I'm gonna go now.